I'm Lee Henderson. I'm a visual artist. I live in Toronto, but I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan, and I attribute my maybe dark sense of humor to having grown up on the prairies. I make work across media. I don't really have any particular medium that I return to with any frequency greater than the others. Most of my work, though, deals with mortality as a focus. Any of the ways that we sort of think something has ended, when actually it's really just sort of changed forms. So an abridged sonic history of global conflict comes out of a thing that I guess saw maybe 6 years ago. In 2015, there was a controversy online around this band out of Calgary who were calling themselves Viet Cong. That was their band name. And they received a lot of heat for that name. It was seen as a problem that they were invoking this history of atrocities from the Vietnam War, which was from a time before any of them had been born, obviously. It was a conflict that didn't involve them or their families at all. And so the idea was that they were taking this on maybe irresponsibly. And so there was a campaign on Twitter and people were asking them to change their name, and it took over a year, and then eventually they decided that they would change their name. But as the fight was going on, I was thinking about, okay, well, what are the other examples of this kind of thing happening? Like, music must be, especially rock music, has to be full of these kinds of examples. Off the top of my head, I was thinking about Joy Division. I was thinking about Rednecks. I was thinking about Franz Ferdinand, and all of these other bands that have a military association with their name. And that's indeed why they chose it, because it sounds hardcore, it sounds serious, it sounds affective, it sounds emotionally and politically fraught. Those are the reasons they chose those band names. But it also made me think about, okay, well, where do we draw that line? Which ones are acceptable and which ones are not acceptable? Some of the associations that they're drawing from are pretty surprising. One of the ones that I really like is Girls Say Yes, which sounds nefarious, like it sounds ominous and nefarious. It's an all-girl punk band out of Russia. And the name actually comes from an anti-war poster that Joan Baez did in the 1960s to protest the Vietnam War. And there's a photo on the poster, and then there's the headline slogan, "Girls say yes to boys who say no," to suggest that, the best way to stop a war is to convince men they'll get laid if they dodge the draft. So it's a pacifistic reference. It's still referencing a war. It's specifically the Vietnam War, specifically the anti-war movement in the United States. And it sounds darker than it actually is. I designed an embroidered patch for each of the bands I had found in my years of research. I was trying to invoke and kind of to tie the band back in a really direct, indelible way to the military history that it was trying to suggest through its name. I call it an abridged sonic history of global conflict because I don't think there's necessarily going to be an end to the collecting of band names. Each year, many, many more bands are produced, are created, are founded, and almost certainly some of those every year are going to have some sort of association with militarism. So I don't really anticipate that this project will end, per se. I may eventually get tired of it, but that's a ways off, I think.